All right, so thank you everyone for joining today. We have a super interesting conversation for Rasmus to come in to talk about how advanced AI applications like ChatGPT, Dolly, and other AI-driven apps, so basically the impact of AI itself, will be fundamentally like disrupting and transforming how product design is done. So it's super, super cool. We're happy to have him here. Thank you, Rasmus, so much for joining.
Thank you. Amazing to be here. And I'm an old gigster myself, so I've been part of the network for a few years. And yeah, so today I'm going to talk about the impact of AI applications on design and primarily product design. So let's get on with it. So first off, design can be viewed as an activity that translates an idea into a blueprint for something useful. So how is AI part of this equation? Well, all of a sudden, it is part of the equation. And product design is just one group of many occupations that are seeing the benefits, but also the potential downsides of AI. And it has been particularly useful in automating tasks and getting prototypes quicker out to customers. But in today's talk, we're gonna kind of take a closer look in how it's actually creating, changing the way that we think about creating products, coming up with ideas, and actually getting them market ready. So yeah, let's get on with it. So I guess all of you has heard about Dolly. If not, you've been probably living under a rock. And Dolly from OpenAI is an amazing project that got started a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden it's in the hands of everyone. And how it kind of works is that it's a combination of neural networks and attention to they can kind of generate images from textual description. So it's a process called neural rendering. And here we can see a few examples of that. So we just ask the engine to generate a fish in a bowl, and it comes up with the result here on the left, and an avocado sofa. So how it actually works is it's trained from massive data sets of images and textual descriptions, which allowing it to kind of learn to associate with specific words and phrases with particular visual features. In a nutshell, or this is the full description of how it actually works. So what can you do with this? So it has loads of different potential applications, from assisting artists or product designers like myself, or any other creative role in generating new ideas, visual concepts, and obviously helping with image generation. So here's a great example, which was published on the blog a while ago. So this image was not, the image on the left here was painted a long time ago, but it was completed by AI just recently. And here is the completed version of a painting that was created hundreds of years ago. So literally, actually. And this makes you question, where is the artist in this equation, and are there any potential dangers to using tools like Dolly? So if we look at the societal danger of Dolly, so early tests have demonstrated seemingly weird results. This can include everything from gender biases to reinforce racial stereotypes, and actually an overall sexual images that OpenAI decided to remove from the equation. And even though it's scary that it can kind of set a new narrative based on something we don't really understand, some experts kind of disagree and emphasize that these tools could further enhance people's work and life. And if we look at it from a designer's point of view, it could generate stock images that could expand the repositories that are already out there, and it kind of helps them bring the imagination to a different level. So in the end, when it comes to risks, just like the typewriter going to a computer, it is a scary transition, but I would say this is next level, and we don't fully understand it just yet. So today, OpenAI and DALL-E, they filter out violent and sexual images from their data set, but who knows really what the future looks like. So in the end, with great power comes great responsibilities. These are some examples of how they actually don't go into too much of the narrative. So here they have an unfiltered on the left side and a filtered on the right side. Let's move away from DALL-E and take a look at some other areas. So we touched a little bit about inspiration of how it could help designers, particularly to access vast amount of data, to analyze it with incredible speed and accuracy. So it allows me in my work to discover new ideas and inspiration when building products, not just hardware products, but software as well. A good example would be when facing a large project and I'm not really sure where to begin. We can have AI sort through thousands of images to kind of get things started, find inspiration. And secondly, we have ideas, generating different ideas. So imagine being able to generate 100 different ideas based on the inspiration part, which could actually generate new products in a matter of minutes. So you can use AI to create concept designs for new products, either by using data and algorithms to generate designs based on the criteria you put in, or by working, or you can have it work side by side as just another tool, which I would love it to come towards. It can create concept that combine human creativity with AI-powered analysis and optimization. Then we have a third point, which is testing and simulation. So designers can use AI to simulate how product will behave in the real life without actually having to go out and conduct all of those tests that we're used to. So when creating software products, what you tend to do is you have this dovetail environment, and you go out and you speak to all your different customers and test discovery sessions, and imagine being able to do this in a completely AI environment, but it's not based out of nothing. It's based on behavior. So if done in the right way, I think it has the potential to really streamline that process. And then fourth, optimization. So AI can help designers optimize their product for certain criteria. That could be cost, weight, or performance, just a few examples. So if you use AI to search the optimal combination of materials and manufacturing processes when creating a new project, that could be kind of the most efficient design to create something new, and a way to create something new. And I think that has a lot of potential. When looking at some of the drones that are being built now, before actually generating the final result, you can use AI to streamline the frame. So you take all the aerodynamic elements and use it together with AI to make sure that the output is as optimized as possible. This was not possible just a few years ago, and now it's certainly possible, and it's bringing the tools of the biggest companies to your home environment. So democratizing it in a way. And if we look at more concrete stuff as a product designer would use, I gathered some elements here besides DALL-E. Me personally wouldn't use DALL-E so much, but I would use something like Chroma. Chroma can generate color palettes, which is typically an endless process, but using AI as an assistant in that process helps a lot. And then we have Visualize, and we also have Adobe, which has their Sensei assistant. So if you haven't seen this before, I'm sure you will be impressed if you try it out. Then I would say that this is just scratching the surface of what's out there. So in summary, how will this affect product designers and the wider creative community? Well, so far, I think it's very controlled, it's not so much a big worry, but and more as a smart assistant in your existing tool set. But I see a lot of potential in it, but also it's almost like you're cannibalizing different roles that won't be as popular or needed in the future. And a good example of that is what Chat GPT has done with copy people. There's no really point in having someone write a long essay for 2 weeks when it can be generated in under a minute. But how do we find a balance? Not sure, but we'll see if my role becomes completely obsolete in the future as well. Yeah, and let's open up the room to have some discussion about what this means for other designers that maybe joined or other occupation roles.
Any questions roll in or not? But I definitely have some. And I'll kick it off to get the juices flowing. So yeah, so generative AI, we've heard a lot of businesses asking us about it, right? Like, so they always come like, we know we should be doing something. We've seen it in the news. It's impactful, but how do we adopt it? And you mentioned a good part at the beginning that I think is a good question to ask, because I don't have a great answer for it. But around the risk side. So I'll play you a hypothetical, and I'm curious to hear your response to it. So we were talking to a large CPG manufacturer. We were pitching them generative AI. They were wanting to learn about it more. But for them, they're a large brand, right? So they're a bit risk averse, and they saw generative AI as like releasing control into who knows what's going to come out of this thing, and how do we manage like the risk from it? So from a product design standpoint, right? How do you kind of de-risk using these tools in a way that is still responsible?
Oh, it's a billion-dollar question, but I can give you an example of a company that I worked with just a year ago, where they were taking this manual assumption that this is how you're supposed to create a critical path analysis. So critical path analysis is to find a shorter path from start to completion.
Mm-hmm.
And typically this would have been done by a human. And when AI was introduced in this process, we saw a lot of pushback from the planners themselves in seeing, okay, is this gonna replace me? Am I not important anymore? But if you change the narrative in a way where you're saying this is going to free up more time, this is going to make you focus your energy on other important stuff, it would just reallocate it a bit, then you have something to talk about. And a good point of view is and a good way to do that is to bring examples of industries that have done this earlier than maybe brick and mortar, for example. Once they go and start implementing AI, which every industry will do, it will they will certainly have to look at some other maybe tech, for example, or how that actually benefited in a positive way. And for developers, I think it's very interesting to see that code reviews are going to change fundamentally now that there can be an assistant looking it over instead of the tech lead before it hits the tech lead. How will that impact the amount of people that's needed? We'll see.
Right. Yeah, and that's funny too, because it leads me to a question around and this is I'm going to try to frame this correctly, because it like itches the back of my mind, but like I'm not really sure how to frame it right. It's that it seems like, right, in order to take a product to market, there's obviously a lot of barriers that have to go through, right, through the product design, all this organization, design, user testing and stuff. And because you have to go through these steps, you're forced to really put time into thinking about the value behind it, right? Because you're investing time, you're investing money, you're investing resources. But as we start to introduce these tools that allow you to automate all of these things, reducing the barrier to entry for new products, whether those are physical or digital, do you see a future where the market just begins to become more flooded than it already is with just new shiny objects, left, right, and center, because there's no longer that barrier that people have to go through that would typically filter out a lot of the I don't want to say the trash, but filter out a lot of these things. So how do you view that kind of future?
Well, as with any new technology, there is always this wild west in the beginning. The other day I read about this startup got tons of funding for using GPT in shipping of
Mm-hmm.
sending automated emails, and for some reason that was super needed. But I'm sure that that might not need a startup that's specific for it. It might be it might be a tool that consolidates several different industries. It might be some sort of standard that comes along. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows? But just like when the web browser came, it was the Wild Wild West and no one really understood how to use it. So I think what's different this time around is that governments early on are seeing some are understanding the potential implications of not regulating and not fully grasping the potential downside of what AI could have,
Mm-hmm.
not just affecting the distribution of the workforce, but also disinformation and how it could affect elections and whatnot. So I think governments and regulators are going to be very early in making sure that we don't end up in the same way as when the browser came.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that it's that's an interesting point too? Because you mentioned, around early technology, right, being just blown, I don't know, blown out of proportions. But I mean, do you think generative AI is overhyped right now?
Well, it depends. So there's one part of me who's really scared, but
Mm-hmm.
on the same time, just looking at me as a product designer, I only see benefits with it. At the end of the day, it's all about the quality to the customer or whatever you're building. And if I could have one support me in that, that's good.
Right.
As long as I stay up to date with what's out there. But I would say a little bit overhyped, as any new technology.
Sure.
Just looking at how much money is being poured into this,
Mm-hmm.
but part of the game.
Right. Right. Now, where do you see, when you're designing product, right? Is there this is there a feel to like over index into like this product now, like maybe when we were designing a product before this, now
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, this has to have AI somewhere within the customer or journey, right? Or the buyer, at some point now, before like maybe 6 months ago when we were designing product, it was like, maybe we don't need AI anywhere. And now when you look at designing a product start to finish, do you look at every problem and say, okay, we have to find a place to slot in AI because we know it's the future. And
Mm.
we know that if we don't think about how to stay competitive with this project, then we might lose. Or is it still back to like the core of we need to think about value for the customer, and if we don't need it, we don't need it. But maybe, because that's an area that I kind of struggle with as well. Is like,
Yeah.
do you shoehorn this into everything or not?
I don't think you need AI for everything. You really don't. You don't need AI for your bakery when purchasing a bagel, but you might need it for understanding when to buy the right amount of dough.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, this conversation has been going on for the last couple of years, where they've thrown in um, terms like ML and AI in everything, but it's not actually being used. The main difference this time around is that you can actually plug into an existing framework that is literally AI,
Mm-hmm.
um, that um, uh, if being used right, it can have a positive impact on whatever you're building.
Yeah.
If you yeah, I think people throw it in a lot without actually knowing what it is.
Yeah. What scares you about generative AI?
So me personally, so if I look at my little brother, he's turning 16 very soon, and he's going from being in little school to actually going in and entering university years. So all of a sudden, he thinks that writing a paper, an academic paper, is should be best done using an assistance like
Hmm.
GPT-3, and I am I am a little bit afraid that he will lose or he will not understand the good things about actually learning to write, learning to think for yourself of how things should be structured, and just relying too much on technology. But I don't want to sound like an old person here because I'm way older than him. Because the same worries were when the computer were introduced in school when I was younger. Uh,
Hmm.
that that my parents were worried about not reading books, but
Right.
what it actually meant for me was that I just had access to more knowledge using the internet. Whilst in my little brother's case, it might mean that he would clear up his mind to focus on other things and maybe stay ahead. So it will be very interesting to see how it will affect him and how he will think about certain things.
Hmm.
But when it comes more from a wider point of view, the one thing that I'm worried about is fake news
Hmm.
and AI generating disinformation that could affect people's opinion and frightening people, and that in is very worrisome, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The disinformation or misinformation, right? Or
Yeah,
I guess
definitely.
yeah, I read a I forgot exactly what the difference between the two is, but I think it's disinformation, right? Is when you are genuinely creating news that's wrong in hopes of
Yeah,
steering people in a way. Yeah, I think that's a big one. The other part too that I would love your take on, and in relation, right, to potentially like your little brother's future that he's going to be in 10 years or 15 years, right? Is that, we see a lot in the news, and I think you had mentioned it, right? Is that generative AI being able to automate tasks that a
mm,
lot of people do today in order to, and I saw this in an article, so that you can free up knowledge workers to do more complex things.
yeah,
Now that's not always, not everyone can always go do more complex things, right? Like there's some people that, their job is what they're really good at, and maybe that abstract thinking that they need that's beyond the level of AI is just something
yeah.
that isn't a good skill set or fit for them. So in the future, if we start to play that out, do you think that generative AI will actually like increase the inequality gap like in the workforce?
It could, but a good example that I sometimes think about is Amazon and their huge workforce that work in distribution centers
Mm-hmm.
to pick up packages and send them out, and how that's going sooner than we think going to be replaced by robots actually doing the heavy lifting.
Right.
Um, Good thing about that is that it's doing the heavy lifting. You don't have to put that strain on your body. The bad thing is, what do we do with this large group of the workforce that is being displaced? How
Mm-hmm.
can we as a society make sure that there's still a purpose so that we don't create inequalities that will just end up like Elysium, the movie a
Yeah.
long time ago, where some people live across above the sky and some
Mm-hmm.
live back on Earth. But we've seen this before, so it's a new industrial revolution,
Right.
and yeah, it's something that everyone needs to think about, and it affects everyone at the end of the day.
Right. No, it's brilliantly said. Well done. Because yeah, I agree. It's going to be an interesting, to look back 5 or 10 years from now and see the impact that it'll have. Now, when you look at ownership
Mm,
of assets created by generative AI, I know that's a big area, right? Like, so for instance, the painting of the girl with the pearl earring.
mm,
Uh, when you look at the future and think about what it means for digital ownership of things created by AI, because the other interesting side of that coin is that now we have blockchain where you can
yeah,
prove digital provenance and therefore establish value, right? And now you have a whole new system that can generate autonomously content.
yeah.
I mean, how do you think that's going to affect, especially from the product or the creative side of your brain? How does that affect those roles, those markets, right? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be vastly different? How does that play out?
Well, I think if we take an example, take IPs. So how when filing a patent, you it's supposed to protect your own intellectual property. But
Mm-hmm.
if that intellectual property is being actually done by a computer, and how is that supposed to be protected still? We're entering all of these gray zones where music is being generated with AI, and it sounds similar to artists that really work hard to produce.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be so many question marks as we kind of learn to adapt, I guess.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think, take the record industry as an example, needs to do early on is not fight too much against it, and maybe see how can we make sure to also come on out on top. And Spotify is a great example of initially they had tons of pushback, but once they partnered with something new that is coming up, it can actually be positive. So maybe we're entering a new phase. The music industry has certainly been hard hit, and seems to
Yeah.
be all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
um,
that's super true because I always tie it back to like there's this crazy, right, like the future, and this is my perspective, right, is that the future with blockchain to be able to actually prove provenance of digital assets that were created, like
mm,
is going to open up a whole new world as far as economies and marketplaces and ways for people to create and sell their
yeah,
creativeness. And then it was like generative AI came in and was like, and I'll be making a bunch of these now.
yeah,
But what does that mean? And it even comes down to, I think you had said it before, if a language model creates a piece of music, but it was
mm,
trained on tons of music created by artists,
yeah,
should they get any royalties from that? Does the language model actually own it? And then you can
mm,
even argue even farther. It's like, well, artists create music and they were influenced by other music. So therefore, should they be giving attribution rights to all the music they've ever
yeah.
listened to? So it's this like unraveling kind of ball of yarn. It's just one of those things super interesting to think about.
Yeah, oh, definitely. We're gonna see a lot of court cases. It's interesting to see what happens with Ed Sheeran right now, and him being sued for being influenced by someone he admires, and now who is gonna be influenced by Ed Sheeran,
Mm-hmm.
and how is that gonna be? It's gonna have to be tried. I mean, and but I think it is one sector that is definitely going through an enormous change, and that's legal.
Mm-hmm.
So um, you wouldn't necessarily uh, need legal counsel to be a human anymore, as long as AI can interpret the legal framework in a
Mm-hmm.
way, it can give you advice. So we have this huge group that this could potentially be displaced or will have to adapt for this. And yeah, we'll see. Maybe even the law book will be rewritten by itself. um, but yeah, there's tons of different questions people really need to think about. But I wouldn't be surprised if some countries, I highly doubt that the US is going to change the constitution, but more countries like Estonia, which is fairly new and has
Yeah.
been very open to digital money and to have digital identifications and whatnot, and how they will make sure that AI is part of that equation as well.
Mm-hmm. Ah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. I actually never really thought about the impact to the legal space, but it is. I mean, it's huge as far as not even like writing new law, not even as far as like it impacting new laws, but also how it will impact existing interpretation of laws, right? Because it's almost
Yeah.
like now you can synthesize down millions of court cases, right? Using a language model versus one person or a team of people having to read through it and they forget stuff and they have bias and all of this, right? Um, so it will be
And what if
interesting
the
to see.
jury becomes,
Mm.
has a say in it? Maybe in the future, parts of the jury will be a computer. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe it will represent a different personas of the jurisdiction it represents. Who knows? It's it's so many question marks.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some people out there, that don't like computers hearing that and just cringing and being like, oh my goodness, there's no like there is the dystopian future, the Minority Report of the future.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, but look, man, thank you so much for stopping by today. I don't see any other questions that are rolled in, but if anyone that is watching or will watch the recording, if you do have any questions for Rasmus, please make sure to reach out. But if anyone wants to follow you or connect or keep up to date, what's the best way for them to do that?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a discussion.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
And until next time, my friend,
Bye.
see ya. All right, and that was Rasmus. Awesome conversation as always. Like these things are, they're really important to think about, especially just from a thought experiment side. Like you gotta run through it, right? And it's healthy. It's healthy to think through these. But anyways, until next time, in our next expert talks, look forward to seeing you there. With that, Keith, do the outro, brother.